and welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List, a podcast about productivity. I'm your host, Eric Fisher, and I'm excited to welcome to the show Kendall Berg. She is a career coach turned author, and her new book, Secrets of the Career Game, 36 Simple Strategies to Win in the Workplace, helps decode the unwritten rules of work. And in this episode, we talk about visibility, reputation, timing, things that people aren't talking about when it comes to not just being seen, but getting ahead in your workplace. And why great work isn't always enough. Sometimes you've got to be strategic about the communication about that work and how to do all of this without burning out. So if you've been feeling like you've been playing by rules that you can't figure out when it comes to your career, this conversation with Kendall Berg is perfect for you. It is my privilege to welcome to the show Kendall Berg. Kendall, welcome to Beyond the To-Do List.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you.
I'm excited to have you here. And I've not had a lot of people who have worked for so many of the large companies that you've had, and then let alone have gone on to start something like The Career Coach and then share that knowledge in your new book, Secrets of the Career Game. 36, although there's more, 36 simple strategies to win in the workplace. I'm curious, obviously you're talking about exposing these, and this is what really kind of got me hooked, exposing these unspoken rules. I've run into so many of them. I'm sure that was probably part of the catalyst of this book. What made you think now is the time?
Yeah, so I wish that we lived in a meritocracy, and that everything was fair and the people who worked really hard and kept their heads down got promoted. But that is not true. And I was that person, right? And I got feedback, this is about 8 to 10 years ago, from a VP that I worked with who said, Kendall, everybody loves having you on their team because you get so much done, but nobody likes working with you. And until you figure that out, you're going to be stuck here. And it was a catalyst that I needed. It was a feedback that I needed to be like, okay, then what do I do about that? Nobody had a good answer. So I'm kind of self-taught. Then I started coaching other people. I got 5 promotions in 6 years, hockey stick to the growth of my career, was offered a CFO-ship before I turned 30, lots of growth, and then was like, nobody is talking about this. We all pretend it doesn't exist. So started coaching, built my business at Career Coach. And then when it came to writing Secrets of the Career Game, I always joke it was the easiest thing I've ever done. I know people complain about writing a book. Don't get me wrong. Editing is not fun. Nobody loves that part. But every lesson in that book, it works. I have done it. I have coached it. I have lived it. I have seen it happen in corporate boardrooms and meetings. And so for me, writing the book now was we're seeing a shift in the culture. People are moving away from, I'll just work really hard at the same company for 25 years and pray they promote me to a corner office. That's going away. And what we're seeing instead is a lot of work smarter, not harder, a lot of work-life balance requests, especially from Gen Z. We're starting to see this shift. And so it felt like the right time to kind of unmask a lot of these secrets that I've learned over the course of my career and say, okay, let me just make it easy for you guys. You can choose not to play, but if you want to play, here's really how the game works, and here's how to set yourself up for success within that.
What was that moment that you realized that you were playing the game at work without knowing the rules? And what is that game?
Yeah, so I worked for a really great company in my mid-20s. And I remember I had a coworker who filed an HR complaint. And she said, there's a cool kids group, it's very cliquey here. And I was like, yeah, of course it's really cliquey. Just be in the clique. And my coworker was like, that's not how it's supposed to work, though. And it was one of those moments where I had another coworker who was like, there's no clique. This isn't a thing. I was like, it definitely is a clique. She's not wrong. You're just in it. So to you, it doesn't feel cliquey because you're part of this group. And to her, it feels very cliquey because she's not. And the difference in what was being in the clique and what wasn't was that the people in the clique were playing the game. And the game never gets talked about. And I always joke it's a little bit like playing chess. And when I was early on in my marriage, my husband decided to teach me how to play chess. And he conveniently left out many rules that would have allowed me to win at chess. Instead, he just taught me some of the rules. And then shockingly, he won. Amazing how that worked out. And I feel it in your career, it's a lot of the same thing, except you're staking your livelihood, your salary, your family's well-being, and we don't understand the rules. So to me, the game is all of the soft skills, all of the networking, relationship building, communication, effective disagreement, all of these things that go into being successful at work that aren't your tactical job. I've worked with so many people in my professional career and in my coaching who are exceptional at their tactical job, right? They're technically proficient, they're hard workers, they have great attention to detail, but then they don't know how to talk about it, or they don't know how to advocate for themselves, or they don't know how to build relationships. And so what happens is exactly what this coworker felt was like, oh, there's this special group of people who are getting promoted really quickly, who are moving up the ladder, who are getting invited to happy hours, who are rubbing elbows with the executive team, but they're not the hardest working. And she's like, this isn't fair. And I agreed, it's not fair. But if you want that type of career progression, there's a way to play that game. Now, I think where it gets a bad rep is everyone's like, oh, you're brown nosing. You're so fake. You're just sucking up to leadership. I can tell you any boss who's ever managed me would say I do not suck up to leadership, but there's a way to be effective in your job and stay authentic to who you are. And that's where you have to learn that skill set. And that's what a lot of the game is to me, is how do you become you, but better, so that your career does what you want it to do, whether that's move faster or change industries or slow down, so that you're making decisions intentionally rather than accidentally.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're basically saying, yes, the work matters, but relationships maybe matter more than the work. Although I would say it's not just relationships. It's also, it is relationships. It is communication. That's one component, but it's also the interaction between the work you do and how you show that the work was done. Maybe yes. Doing your own PR in a sense.
Exactly. So one of my favorite rules in the book, one of my favorite secrets is Secret 16, which is your boss has no idea what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I stand by that till the day I die. I have had some really great managers. They have no idea what's going on. And it's not because they're not great at their job. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't want me to be successful. It's because they have their own job. And they're focused on that job. They're not focused on my job. And they shouldn't have to be. But in order for me to get promoted, I have to advocate for myself. I have to talk about my work. Why is it impactful? Why is it important? What does it bring to the company? I have to be able to articulate what I'm doing without it being a laundry list of tasks, right? We've all talked with that one person. We're like, what are you working on? They're like, oh, I'm so busy. I had this meeting and then I had to send this email and then I worked on this PowerPoint and then so-and-so won't get back to me. And by the time they're done talking, you've run through your grocery list 4 times. You've already planned out what you're going to eat tomorrow. You're thinking about the next meeting you have to run to. So we don't just want to over-inform. We want to effectively educate our leadership on what we're doing and why it's important. So yes, it's all of those pieces, the relationships, the networking, the self-advocacy. Those all come together to make you successful at the game. And that's where people get stuck, is they can be tactically proficient to a point, but if nobody knows the value of that tactical proficiency, how important is it really to the company and to your boss?
Well, and some of this comes down to what's the balance, or better put, what's the percentage of promotable versus non-promotable tasks in your day-to-day active workflow. Some people may not know what we mean by that. They may think, oh, well, I do something and then I get promoted. No, it's more like promotion. In other words, you promote it, make people aware of it. Can you talk a little bit about striking a balance there? Because honestly, sometimes we feel like we're doing all non-promotable tasks and we want to be doing some of those more visible, promotable, hey, I just did this and it was awesome and look at me type stuff. How do we advocate for ourselves? I mean, again, it's that job description, right? Where we look at the job description and we say, yep, I do this, and this. Oh, but I do all this other non-promotable stuff too.
So I would say a good rule of thumb is about 30% of your job should be non-promotable, 70% should be promotable or self-development. But I'll give you a specific example of what that looks like, because I think it's helpful. If I hired somebody to run a report Fridays at 7 a.m., and that person came in and they ran their report every Friday at 7 a.m. And I never heard from them again. But the report always went out and it was right. Would I promote them? Probably not.
Right.
I'd pay them. They did their job. They did what I asked them to do. Are they going to be excelling and progressing really quickly? Probably not. Meanwhile, if I hire somebody in to run that report and they meet with each stakeholder who's receiving that report, they make a list of all the ways that report's being used. Then they make recommendations to improve that report. They automate that report so that it's being run daily instead of weekly and that it's on an automated workflow. And then they do a roadshow where they go to each of those stakeholders and sell them on why this dashboard is more effective and more helpful. And then they drive efficiency across the organization. And they come back to me and they say, hey, I ran the report, I rebuilt it, I made it better, and now I've driven 30% efficiency across the company. Then do I promote them? Probably.
Yeah.
But all they did was take a non-promotable task and zhuzh it up a little bit, right? They took something that was non-promotable that wasn't going to help them get traction, and they reframed it, they leaned in, they were innovative, and then they sold it. Sold it to the stakeholders, sold it to me, their boss, sold it to the organization as why it was helpful. That is what gets you that high visibility. So there's a few ways to get your tasks in that more promotable space. One is for the idea to have been yours in the first place. Always easier to do cool stuff if you're the one who came up with it, right? I always joke there's so many projects in my career that were never part of my job scope, but they were the right thing to do and they made sense. So I did them. And those are what got me a lot of my visibility. So the best way is it's your idea. The second is it's a non-promotable task, but you think about how to make it better for the company. Why are you doing it in the first place? Who is it helping? Why is it valuable? How do we make it better? Now everybody's talking about AI. It's a buzzword, right? Can you use AI to do it better? I don't know. Run it through ChatGPT, see what happens. And the third way is to build a good reputation for yourself and a good brand, so that when there are cool promotable tasks and projects, somebody calls you first. I want Eric on my team. He's great. I know that he would kill it in this project and he'd be super helpful and he'd add a ton of value. When you're that person, you're naturally going to get more opportunities like that as well. So those are three ways that we kind of start to shift our work towards promotable. But don't look at your long list of unpromotable tasks and go, oh no, well, I'm stuck. This takes 100% of my time and none of it's promotable. Reinvent it, innovate it, delegate it, figure out a new way to do things. That's when you'll start to see the shift. You're not just a cog in the machine who runs a report Fridays at 7. You can add more value, but you have to be intentional with it.
Yeah. And it sounds like you almost want to assess, okay, what is my list of stuff that, what's my overall task list? And say, okay, do a checklist, promotable, non-promotable, non-promotable, go down through and then say, okay, here's my list of non-promotables as far as I'm concerned. It may not be true. You could maybe even sneakily kind of have a conversation with somebody and double check on some of those, but then you pick something in there. Maybe that, and I'm speaking from experience. This is what I would do. I would say, okay, which one of these do I already have some ideas that nobody's asked me to do? And let me just start by picking one of these tasks. And maybe it's run the report that you were talking about. Okay. Maybe they haven't asked you to run the report. Can you come up with a report that you can run that nobody's asking you to do? And then what can you do with that? Who can you give it to with what suggestions? And again, without being too overzealous, too, brown nosery, I guess is the best way to put it. What can you do there? But then the other key piece is, maybe which one of these is one that would be fun for you to do so it doesn't feel like you're taking on extra work that no one's asked you to do and no one's going to see unless you actually do it.
Yeah. And that's a great tactical way to kind of go down that list. I always start with clients at writing out all the things you do and bucketing them. What percentage are you spending on non-promotable? What percentage are you spending on high visibility promotable work? What percentage on networking and self-development? Right? That's a big place where I get a lot of zeros. I don't spend any time networking and self-development. Well, if you're not networking, it's really hard to figure out what problems the people you work with are facing that you could then fix that becomes promotable work that gets you. See, it's all connected, right? So it's a great way to go down that list, find those opportunities, make it fun for yourself. A good boss, a good leader is doing that on your behalf. But if we're all being honest in this space, a lot of leaders are not that great. So take some ownership of it, come up with your own plan. But then you have to talk about it. If you're just taking on extra work for the sake of extra work, you're never going to get that credit. You're never going to get that promotion. You then have to turn around and use that network, use those relationships to say, hey, here's this thing I did that's really great for you. Let me help you. Let me add value, and then sell that. And so I always joke, we're all in sales, from the developer engineer who hates the word sales at all, to the head of marketing, to the operations call center employee. If you are not selling yourself as a business, you're probably not going to get credit for the business that you're running. And so you have to have that little bit of, hey, I did this. Here's why it's important. Here's the value it adds. Also, it was great because I'm me and I did an awesome job because so many of us do great work. Then how do we highlight it?
And speaking of it being all connected, you talk about our most marketable skills and how that may not be the thing that we most enjoy doing, but it might be the thing that creates the most impact. Can you speak to that a little bit, tapping into those as far as the promotional and non-promotional tasks?
I've said this on other podcasts. I do not believe a dream job exists. I'm sorry to break your heart. I wish it did. Okay, if laying on the beach, reading books and drinking a Mai Tai was a job, then dream jobs exist for me, okay? But in reality, we're all going to work. And so what makes you valuable at work is your differentiating skill that nobody else can do as well as you. And there's a book called The New Extraordinary Leader. It's very dense. I don't necessarily recommend reading it because it's a little bit textbooky, but he goes on to say that he studies 120,000 leaders, 60 different countries. And the one thing that they all have in common is they do one thing exceptionally well, and nobody cares about anything else. And when we're growing up and we're building our skills, we're taught in school, like, you might be great at English, but you also need to be good at math and good at history and good at science. The reality in the corporate world is you don't need to be good at everything. You need to be great at something. And then you need to be able to market that something to other companies. So for me, what I'm great at is I'm a translator. I can speak to the CEO or the developer engineer or the head of marketing or the ops call center rep and say 4 different things and have them all hear the same message. And where that became really valuable was facing off with executive leadership, because I could take really complex things and simplify them in a way that was easy to digest. That became my superpower. Now, there were tons of other people I started as a data scientist, okay? There were tons of people who were better data scientists than me, all right? There were tons of people who were better analysts than me. There were tons of people who were better, frankly, communicators than I was. But I could make sure everybody heard the same thing. And that was my special sauce that helped me progress my career. So you have to identify that. And then you have to make sure you're at a company that needs that skill. I have also worked for companies that were very siloed, very bureaucratic. They did not want me going to talk to a bunch of different groups. My skill is a heck of a lot less valuable if I can't talk to anybody about what's going on. And so once you understand what you're good at, you have to understand what your company wants. And this is something you should suss out in an interview process or as you're making internal moves in a company, because we could talk more about subcultures within companies, but you want to make sure that you know what you're good at, you know how to sell it, you know how to talk about it, and then you know how to find companies that need that skill. That's when you're going to get good alignment. I always joke, I think in this job, people think, oh, she was such a stellar employee and all of her bosses loved her. No. I had plenty of bosses that did not like me, and I had plenty of roles I was in where I was not as successful because the company didn't need the skill that I brought. And so it's important to be able to ascertain what that right fit looks like so that you can market effectively and you can grow your career. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I hate my job, I hate my boss, nobody cares about what I'm doing, it's not you. It's likely a bad fit between your skill and what the company needs. So that might require a different team or a different company in order to find a better fit. And 2, then you have to be introspective and say, okay, was it me a little bit? Like, was I advocating for myself? Was I communicating effectively? Was I doing all of these things? Those 2 pieces come together. I'm marketing myself in the right space and I'm marketing myself at all. You have to be doing both in order for that career progression to really grow quickly.
I think one of the other things that comes up here is we often are told we need to learn this new skill or that new skill. It's like we're trying to fix things that aren't broken. And instead of doubling down on our own strengths, we're trying to cover over our weaknesses. And I know you have some experience with that.
Yes. And I have plenty of weaknesses. Okay. Like I said at the start of this, I wrote this book because I sucked at it. I was not good at playing the game, which is why I needed to learn how to do it. Because communication, collaboration, those you must be good at. To your point of learning new skills, if those are the two your boss is telling you you're bad at, then you need to work on them. Because at some point, your job becomes way less tactical and way more about those two key skill sets, right? But in the absence of that, I've had bosses tell me like, Kendall, you're not very, you don't have a good risk aptitude. You don't take a lot of risks. You're not, very keen to learn development engineering. I moved into tech from data science and everyone's like, oh, you got to learn to be a developer engineer. You got to learn to code. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So that's not what you need me for. You need me to translate what the developers are doing so the C-suite knows what's going on. You don't need me writing code. That's not the most value that I bring. So there are spaces where you have to lean in and learn new things. You have to shore up those weaknesses. Disagreement is a big one. I'll use it as an example. A lot of the time people come to me and they say, my boss doesn't care about my opinion. I tell them something's a bad idea. They don't listen. They just do whatever they want anyways. Odds are that they do care what you're saying. It's that they don't like how you're saying it. So when it comes to disagreeing, there is a skill to learn there to shore up your weakness. This is something that I was really bad at early on in my career. I'd be like, no, that's a dumb idea. Why would we do that? That's not going to work, right? I literally sat in a meeting once where I was like, that's stupid. Please don't say that on a call. It's not going to go well. Just my advice. And what I learned over time was, hey, I can see that potentially having an issue in this specific situation. Have we considered a solve for that? Maybe they have. Maybe they've already solved the problem that you're actually worried about, and you're just stressed in your brain because you don't know what it is yet. Asking more questions, giving specific examples of, hey, I could see that causing a problem in X circumstance. How do we plan to solve for that? Being a collaborative team member, you're still disagreeing. Hey, I don't think that's going to work in this situation. But maybe somebody does have a solve. Or maybe they come back and they say, hey, actually, that's a great call. It probably won't work there. And you say, okay, do we need to think about their potential solutions? Or do we want to double down on this and we need to find a solve for this niche case, right? Then we're collaborating. We're still disagreeing that we think this is the best solve, but in a way that helps the team. And so that's a place where I had to shore up my weakness. That's a place where it's worth investing in that skill development. Somebody tells you, hey, I know you're really good at communication. You're really good at collaboration. You're really good at your job. I want you to go learn how to shovel snow really efficiently. Like, probably not the best space to invest your time. Like, are you going to become a snow shoveling expert? Maybe, but do we need that for your job? Probably not. So taking that feedback intent and those positive grains that you get from your leadership to figure out where you really need to invest in yourself is really important, rather than running all over the place to learn all the different things. Now, I will say AI is one of those things where everybody is going to have to learn it, unfortunately, right? If you don't learn AI, somebody who learned AI is going to take your job, unfortunately. So that's one where I think everybody should be investing in. How does AI play in your space? But, I remember when we moved from Access databases to Excel. Don't judge me, okay? And everybody is like, oh my gosh, like you gotta know Access. You gotta know how to use it. And I was like, aren't you gonna put it in an Excel that you're gonna send me? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna learn how to use all those Access databases then. I'll just wait. And so there's a little bit of nuance here, but yes, you have to shore up your weaknesses, especially in the soft skill space. But as long as you know what your real skill is, double down on that. Do that really, really well. Stand out in that space. That's going to help you shine at work.
I know that you've walked clients through somewhat of a branding exercise to discover those 5 strongest skills and help them reshape a job description. That's helpful when you want to move forward in those strengths. Again, I love that you're saying we've got to shore up those weaknesses, because sometimes you're in a position where you're not going to be able to move laterally or even out of the company completely into something else right now. So for short term, shore those up. But for long term and for broader, more leaning into your, again, 5 strongest skills, walk us through that a little bit in terms of reshaping how we're going to carry ourselves and have more agency moving forward.
Yes. So the exercise that I lead my clients through is we create an 11 list and 3 passion statements. And we use this to guide our career forward. So the 11 list is very simple. It is 5 things you want to be known for at work, right? I want to be known as strategic, a great leader, easy to work with, an effective communicator, smart, an expert in my space, you name it. 5 things you want to be known for. Keep it simple, This is not you don't have to solve the problems of the universe with 42 in order to get there. Just 5 things you want to be known for, 5 things you don't, right? What are the 5 things that you hate in other people at work that you don't want people saying when you're not in the room? And then we combine these to create our brand statement. I always joke, this is my one creative skill, and it will slowly but surely be replaced by ChatGPT probably. But take what you do at work, take what you're excited about, use that to create a brand statement. So my personal brand statement is, I'm the person that you put in a black hole to bring organization to chaos. I do this by building the next generation of great leaders and repeatable, scalable processes for the organization. It's been my brand for about 15 years. Every manager who's ever managed me has written the phrase black hole in a performance review, and they all think they came up with it. So once you know your personal brand, you can really start to use that to influence people's perceptions of you and what you work on. But once you know those 5 things you want to be known for, you know how to show up at work. You know what your strengths are going to be. You know how to self-evaluate, right? High performers especially, we make one mistake somewhere in a spreadsheet and we're like, I failed. They're going to fire me. I'm terrible at my job. We're going to be homeless. Like, we tend to go to an extreme very quickly. So the 5 things you want to be known for is a great self-assessment. Hey, am I showing up the way that I want to at work? And then in reverse is the company looking for these 5 things that I want to be known for, right? If I want to show up as respectful and I want to show up as timely and I want to show up as organized, I need a company that's slightly in chaos because that organization needs to be valuable, but who's got a really good culture and a really positive work environment for respectful to be there and timely to be there, right? So use those 5 things to determine the company cultures that you want to work for. And then the last piece is come up with 3 passion statements. So this is separate from the 11 list, but these are non-tactical things you really like at work, right? I like when every day looks different. I am not the person who can come in. Like, I love accountants. If you're an accountant and you're listening to this, you are like one of my favorite people on the planet, because I hate that job and I'm so happy that you do it. I cannot sit there and account all day. It's not my skill, right? I have to have differences in days. I like to see the results of the work that I do. I want to build something and then watch somebody use that something and say, this is great, right? And I want to be able to lead the next generation. Those are my 3 passion statements. Now, there are 1,000 jobs where I can do those 3 things, where you have very dynamic days. The projects you work on are internally facing, so you can go see somebody use them, and where I get to lead a team. But there are a million jobs where I can't do those 3 things. And those are the jobs I don't want. Immediately eliminated. You want me to be an accountant? Nope. You want me to be a bungee jumping instructor? Nope, does not fit, right? I cannot see the effects of what I'm teaching. And if I do see the effects, I'm terrified. It's not a good fit for me. So I think that once you know what you really enjoy at work, what your core values are, how you want to show up, then you can align your career to those things. Then you have criteria. What I never want anyone to do is have an accidental career. There was a senior executive at a company I worked for, and she gives this whole public speech once a year about how she's had this accidental career. And when I was in my 20s, I was like, yes, that is me. I am accidentally flying around with no idea where I'm going. I look back and I'm like, no, please don't do that. Please do not wait for your boss to tap you for something. Please do not wait for a company to recruit you. Please do not wait for XYZ. You have control. You have power. You should use that to drive your career in a certain direction. Now, other people will have influence over how fast you move in certain directions. But if you don't know what you want, your boss certainly doesn't know what you want, which means their boss definitely doesn't know what you want, which means when performance reviews come around and they go, what does Kendall want to do next? You're going to have a lot of radio silence. So making sure you understand yourself is that starting point, that cornerstone, and then use that to drive your career in that direction.
Well, you mentioned performance reviews, so that's where I wanted to go next. So you're reading my mind. I can't help but think that as we're thinking about all of this, and especially us high performers, we've got this constant, almost quarterly and annual thing coming around the bend, and we kind of question, what are they going to measure me by this time? How can I prepare for this? Like, how do we get this wrangled together to where, one, we feel ready, or we're constantly preparing for it without feeling like we're preparing for it?
Yes, it's a great question. And I wish Eric, in the first week of everybody's job, I wish they made you sit in like a mock performance review. I really do.
Yes.
Because when you get to the senior levels where you are in performance reviews, you're like, this is how you decided what happened to everybody. Like it's such a weird exercise. And what's sad is most of these conversations about your career progression are going to happen when you're not in the room and you can't defend yourself and you can't share your perspective. So to your point, you do have to do groundwork ahead of time. So there's three things really quick that I'll mention that go into performance reviews. One is you want to know as many people in your performance review as possible. I've worked for companies where they literally did a heat map where somebody said, okay, Eric, do we know him well? Green, kind of, yellow, not so well, red. And every leader would rank Eric in how well they knew him. And only the people who were greens across the board were talked about for promotions. I have seen it happen. I know it happens, right? Having more voices in the room that is talking about you is beneficial. So coffee chats, networking, building relationships. It's not just your boss. I think a lot of people have this misconception like, oh, my boss is going to advocate for me to get promoted. No, they're not. Not in a room where they're the only one, for sure. So have a loud voice in that room, even if you're not there, is the first piece. The second piece is don't be afraid to ask the question and get an answer. A lot of people will say, oh, I want to get promoted at year end. I'm just going to work really, really hard. And then I'll put in my performance review, all the great stuff I did, and then maybe they'll promote me. And part of why we don't have that conversation explicitly with our boss is a little bit of fear. What if I ask if I'm going to get promoted at the end of the year and my boss says no? Then what do I do? Right? But if you don't ask, you're still probably not getting promoted if you weren't going to get promoted then. So have that conversation. Hey, I'm expecting to get promoted in the next 6 to 18 months. Is that feasible? What do you need to see from me to make that happen? Sometimes they'll answer and they'll say, no, it's not feasible. You're on a 3 to 5 year track. And then you need to decide, am I comfortable waiting 3 to 5 years? If the answer is yes, great, then let's make a plan. If the answer is no, we pivot. And then we start to look for external opportunities, right? So don't be afraid to have that conversation ahead of time and have a plan so that by the time performance reviews come around, your boss already knows what you're expecting. You've already done all the things they asked you to do to be prepared for that promotion, and then it's out of your hands. And then the last piece is don't ever put bad stuff about yourself in performance review. So I feel like this kind of goes without saying, but I have seen a lot of performance reviews lately where people are like, well, I just wanted to be honest. Don't be that honest, okay? Maybe you did have a miss, like, hey, I didn't deliver this, but it's because it was pushed to Q1 of next year, or we had reprioritization, I ended up working on something else. You can say, hey, this was deprioritized in favor of this other project. Don't put, I dropped the ball and I didn't get this done. Don't ever write things that hurt you in a performance review. They will read them and they will talk about them. So be nice to you in that performance review when it comes around and make sure that you're tracking to your goals. If something is deprioritized, what replaced it? Keep a note, keep a tracker. People who sign up for my email list get a free accomplishments tracker. You can also just use a Word document for all I care, but everything you work on. What did you do? Who did you work with? What was the impact? Did it trade off with a different project? Did you work with an executive? All those things, track them. Because when you get to the end of the year, you're going to forget. Right? I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, let alone the project I worked on in January that I thought was so important in January, right? So keep a list, talk nicely about yourself, make that a really professional, positive performance review. And then if you've built the network, you've had the conversation about what you're expecting, and you have the documentation to back it up, that's when we see success. Now, market's weird right now. You may still not get it because of budget cuts or whatever's going on, but give yourself the best possible chance by doing all three of those pieces. And don't wait until November and go, oh, shoot, performance reviews are at the end of the year. No, they're not, because they talked about your performance review in October. It gets submitted December 31st. It gets communicated to you March 15th, but they talked about it in October. Don't wait till December and be like, oh, I need to do something really big so my performance review is positive. Too late. Everybody's in like holiday mode at that point. So give yourself the best possible chance and do that preparation ahead of time. It doesn't have to be a constant every one-on-one, but make sure you've got that strategy in place.
It almost sounds like we should be keeping for lack of a better term, almost a work diary or journal. Let's go with journal because diary has weird connotations, but a journal, or a log book, whatever. I don't care. But tracking it, in other words, like, this is what I did today. This is what I did. I mean, I get it. As soon as I said, this is what I did today, some people's minds went, I can't do this every day. Totally fine. But what's your like weekly, you've got to document it, because we are so busy that we're going through day to day and week to week and even month to month and quarter to quarter where we don't really know what we're doing. Well, here's the thing. If you don't know what you're doing, how are you going to tell somebody else what you're doing? It's kind of like you want to have that almost, if you were to meet at the water cooler or whatever that digitally form takes these days, you want to be able to have an answer to, hey, so what are you working on right now? You want to have it right there in front of you. You don't want to hesitate.
Yeah. And on that point, I send a recap to my executive team every month of what my team did that month. Every month. Do they read it? Probably not. But I have it documented in an email. This is what my team did. This is the impact of it. Here's what I contributed. Here's the value of that every month. Because then when performance reviews come around, I have a record of what I did. If somebody stops me in the hallway and goes, hey, what are you working on? I'm like, oh, I sent you an email on Friday, but here's really the highlights. It helps you stay organized, you stay on top of it. So I agree with you, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, I track my tasks weekly and I send my recaps monthly. You need some type of forum so that when you get to the end of the year, you're not like, I worked really hard and answered lots of emails and I went to lots of meetings and I didn't cry. Like, this cannot be the performance review criteria for ourselves. And something I'll just add to that is when you track that, track the impact. Doesn't always have to be a metric, but it made Eric's life easier. It made Kendall's life easier. It made a report faster. It made a team more efficient. It helped reach more clients. It converted more clients. Like, what can you track for your impact? And do that as much as possible, because that's really what's going to help when that performance review comes, is because they don't care if you did 52 million tasks, but they do care if you made the team 30% more efficient going into the next year.
Yeah. And speaking of impact, let's tie this into competencies and how that then is the measure that they're using to decide who is getting promoted or not.
Yes. So some companies will publish their competencies. I recommend, if you're listening to this and you're like, I have no idea what a competency is, ask your HR business partner if they have a competency chart. A lot of companies have them. Sometimes they publish them. Sometimes your HRBP just like has them on a file in their desk somewhere. Sometimes a company doesn't. If your company doesn't, email me and I will send you just a generic version. But your competencies are usually how you are evaluated. So I'm going to use Capital One as an example. They do a great job of publishing their competencies in a really public way. You can even Google them, I think. And for every level of seniority, there are different job categories with different expectations. So a job category might be job performance. As an associate, you can do your job, but you require management oversight. You ask a lot of questions and you need additional support. Whereas as a senior associate, you ask the occasional question. You don't need as much oversight, but you do need some support. As a manager, you ask very little questions. You see how it's going. It's getting more senior as the seniority increases. But in that competency chart, it's not just job performance. It's communication, leadership, project management, organization. There's different competencies that you're measured on, which goes back to this game of, it's not just the tactical part of your job. It's everything else that helps you be successful. And you need to know where you fall in this. So if your company does publish them, one of the great exercises I love to do is you should go self-evaluate yourself. Hey, I think I'm a manager at this skill, but a senior associate at this skill, but a director at this skill. Go through, highlight which box you think you fall in for each category, and then give a blank version to your boss and have them do the same thing and see where we disconnect. If I think I'm director level at communication and my boss thinks I'm junior associate level, we have a big problem because I think I'm doing great and they think I suck, right? This is a really helpful benchmarking exercise. If your company doesn't publish competencies, I have a general one that I use that I will evaluate my team members, have them evaluate themselves. I send it to my boss. Here's how I want to rank myself. Does this align with your expectations, your understanding of me? You can also use a job description for this. at some point they posted a JD for your job, pull it back down. Hey, I think I'm green on these tasks you put in here. I'm yellow on these. I'm also doing a bunch of stuff that wasn't in the job description that now I want to layer on, right? Use the tools at your disposal to drive a constructive conversation. Don't just go to your boss and go, what do I need to get better at? Because 90% of bosses are going to go, you're doing fine. Thanks so much. And the other 10% are going to micromanage you within an inch of your life of like, you can't do anything right. So don't give them vague questions. Instead, say, hey, here's the competency chart. Here's how I think I'm performing. Do you align with that? Or, hey, here's my job description. Here's how I think I'm performing. Are there gaps that you see? Have a constructive conversation. That's what's really going to help you understand where you sit, because most managers don't know how to give that feedback in a powerful way. And so we get lost. And then we get to performance reviews and we're like, we never talked about this. So now my performance review has all these things I'm terrible at in it. Why didn't you bring it up? So making sure that you have tools to guide that conversation can be really helpful.
Kendall, we have gone over, I think, probably 5 to 7 of the simple strategies. I don't know. I haven't been keeping track. It doesn't really matter. The point is there's 36 in the book, and probably more than that, really, if you really like broke it down even further. We've scratched the tip of the iceberg here. I want to direct people to where they can, one, connect with you, find out all about what you're doing, but most importantly, grab the book as it's brand new out now. Where can people go to do that?
Yeah, so I am That Career Coach everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Gmail. Find me. That Career Coach is the easiest way. ThatCareerCoach.net for the website. But if you're looking to buy a copy of my book, Amazon's the fastest place to get it, Secrets of the Career Game. But you can also buy it at the link on my website, ThatCareerCoach.net, as well as through my social media links. So my goal is to give as much advice that is tactically able to be implemented as possible, rather than vague, be better at your job. I think that's great. It has a place. That's not the way this book is written. This book will tell you what to do, how often to do it, and with whom to make sure that your career is successful. So I appreciate you guys checking it out. Let me know what you think. But Eric, thanks so much. It was a great chat.
Yeah, this has been awesome. And I think people can tell from this conversation, there are some solid ways to win in the workplace in this book. And you really know what you're talking about. So Kendall, thanks for sharing. And I'm sure this will just be the first of many times you'll show up on this show for sure.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Eric. Thanks so much.
Well, that's another podcast crossed off your listening to-do list. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Kendall Berg on cracking the career code. I hope that you got some insight into some of those unwritten rules that have been affecting you probably without you even knowing it. And I bet you also know somebody else that is just as frustrated with these unwritten rules. Think of that person and do me and them a favor by sharing this episode with them. You can do that by hitting the share button in your podcast player app of choice where you're listening to this, or head on over to the show notes at beyondthetodolist.com and share it from there. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next episode.